Teenage pregnancy continues to be a concern. Reports indicate nearly 12,000 children in South Africa aged between just 10 and 14 years old became pregnant last year. Many of these pregnancies arise from statutory rape, go unreported due to stigma and fear. One organization is calling on the government to intervene and curb the ever-increasing rape of minors. To discuss this further, we are joined by activist Kekelesto Khena. Good morning to you. Thank you for joining us here on the South African Morning. The stats are quite shocking. I read a stat that said in the past 3 years, there's been a significant increase in pregnancies amongst minors. Let's just talk about the shocking stats.
Yeah, so you have over 1,200 children that were pregnant, at least in 2022. And this is with the state not knowing how you have children aged between the ages of 10 and 14 pregnant. And we felt, you go through social media and you see a lot of outrage on this particular issue, and actually nothing has been done. And then we thought at that point that it would be necessary for us to lobby the state to do something, because just complaining about stuff doesn't actually get us anywhere. We need to get to the point where we are fixing the problems that are plaguing our nation.
I think that the concern is also who is impregnating a minor between the age of 10 and 14 years old, and why are we seeing an increase in these sort of cases? Are the repercussions not strong enough? Where are these loopholes? What needs to be strengthened?
So I think we always know as women that women are always at the receiving end of the socioeconomic problems that exist in the country, and in a place where we believe socioeconomically women are struggling, children are therefore placed in vulnerable positions. You have women that must wake up and go to work and leave their children unattended to. You've got parents who are unemployed. You've got men who are just predators. You've got people who are using their access to income to lure children into these things. So that's part of the problem. But the biggest part is actually the loophole that exists between the police and the children themselves. So we know that the Department of Education has introduced a policy that says if a child shows up pregnant at school, then the school has a responsibility to notify the police. But then what happens is that in most instances, out of shame, guilt, and a lot of things, parents pull those children out of school before they can actually get to be reported, right? And so that's when we start having problems. So we thought if we can lobby the state to make pregnancies of minors a notifiable incident in the medical space. So if a child shows up pregnant at hospital, then it forces the doctors and the nurses to call a police officer and an investigation to happen. Because if you look at the sub-stats, they don't show the cases of pedophiles or of statutory rape. You don't see those stats because they're not collecting and they can't collect them. So these people are getting away with it. So if we can get them at the hospital, because at some point this child must go see a doctor, this child must go and give birth, we believe that at that point you can bring in a police officer, an investigation can happen. Who's the father of the child? How did this pregnancy happen and where? And how then do we support this child? So there's things that can happen within the medical space that we are not being able to do. So we think this intervention will also, because we are saying we are also targeting traditional healers. And so if the mother decides to take the child to a backstreet abortion, for instance, or whatever, whoever has seen a pregnant child within the medical space, whatever they believe that is, and does not report the matter, can then themselves be held liable. So we're trying to close as many loopholes as we possibly can so that we can find out who is impregnating 10-year-olds and 14-year-olds and 15-year-olds and ensure that there's repercussions.
Definitely. Let's also unpack a point that you've touched on, and that is the issue of social stigma and also fear. You mentioned that a lot of these young girls are being pulled out of school because of this. How do we tackle this issue?
So fortunately, within the schooling system, the child does have support. There are laws that will ensure that the child can remain in school. But there's also needs to be an education. I was speaking to someone earlier about how there's always been campaigns around teenage pregnancy. But in all of these campaigns, the child is victimized. So it's always the teenager who's problematic. It's always the teenager who's going out and doing things they're not supposed to be doing. But in essence, half of these children are not at even the age where they can consent. And so it means that there is a problem, and we need to I think, face the mirror to society and say that there's a problem here. There's a way that we are not raising our girls properly, that we are not supporting our girls properly, that we are not educating our girls properly, that we are not supporting them properly to be able to, one, make the right decisions, but also to be able to report these men that are taking advantage of minors.
And just, I think it's important to have these conversations amongst our peers and in society as well, because yes, we speak about gender-based violence, which is an ongoing issue in our country quite often, but statutory rape is not a conversation that I hear too often. How do we start having those conversations?
Because we don't talk about consent ever. Even when you look at our rape stats, the majority of it is that we just don't get this thing of consent as a society. We don't get the point where someone must say yes to something. We don't get issues like age of consent. We are not talking enough about the age of consent. A number of people don't even know that having sex with a minor, particularly someone who is under the age of 16, is statutory rape. They don't know that if you are 19 and you are dating and having sex with a 15-year-old, that is statutory rape. Parents must also get involved, get to understand, who is my child seeing? Who is my child going out with? How old is this person? We are very blasé. I get that sometimes parents don't have the time because they're working and they're away from their children. But when we do get the opportunity, we need to know what circles our children are in. We need to know what is happening in social media so that we can protect our children, because some of these predators are online. You go online and you see older men trying to hook up with children, and you're like, where are the parents? Why are you not watching what your children are accessing? So we need to do that, but we also need to have harsher punishments for pedophiles in this country. We don't seem to see a lot of that. Like I said, the cases on statutory rape are very limited. The numbers are very limited, and we are hoping through this campaign, firstly, we'll be able to draw attention to the issue of pedophiles, the issue of teenage pregnancies by older persons, because these children are not impregnating themselves, and they're being impregnated by people we believe are certainly older. So we want to then tell society and show society that this is happening, and we ask society to then support us and sign this campaign so that we can force the Minister of Health, who, by the way,
it's a very important conversation that parents need to have with their children, and a conversation that we need to have amongst ourselves as well. Those stats are shocking. Reports indicate that nearly 12,000 children in South Africa aged between 10 and 14 became pregnant last year. That was Kekelesto Khena. She's an activist trying to raise awareness around this issue, but a very important and vital conversation.